Welcome. This is the podcast series dedicated to living a revenue culture. For those of you who've been with us for a while, you know living a revenue culture means you've maximized your profits because you've optimized your people in a low friction revenue context. And that sounds easy, but there's a lot of work to that. And so twice a month, we do one of these sessions. We try to bring you people out there in the real world doing this stuff. And sometimes they're just bringing you some massively successful stuff, and other times they're challenged, but that's how we all learn. So today I'm thrilled. We have Jacob McGill, and he's going to share some fascinating things. He's doing the kind of extension to our work that I've been looking for a long time. So we help create the context, and then somebody needs to actually go optimize it and take it into the real world. And I think you're going to hear that's what he does. He's the founder and CEO of 80/20 Media. He's from Vancouver, Canada. And while 80/20 Media sounds like a marketing agency, it's really a growth operating system partner for those companies between 2 and 20 million who really want to eliminate chaos, streamline operations, and scale with confidence. A lot of us say scale, and we kind of say it like we're hoping it works out. Jacob's also got a story to tell us about rebuilding his life after an auto accident and the application of Aikido to life. So I think this will be a really interesting day. So welcome, Jacob.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks so much for having me here and, such a generous introduction. I really appreciate it.
Well, the first time we met, I was really amazed at how consistent the work you do is to the work we do. And we don't do any of the things you do. So, in the real world, we're always looking for partners we can refer clients to that do that. So tell us a little bit about what it is 80/20 does. And please start with how you got the name.
Okay. Uh, to go back to the name, we've got to rewind close to 15 years now. And when we first started out, you mentioned this in the intro, like media does sound like marketing because at that time, we'd basically built an assembly line. And our goal with the assembly line was to capture content from our clients. And then we worked our way up to, I think we maxed out at a team of 28 people where we'd process, distribute, and publish that content. And the thinking at the time, although most people didn't even know who he was yet, was we're going to make you Gary V of your niche.
Yep.
People looked at us sideways when we said, don't come in and meet with us. Stay at home, click this button. It's called Zoom. And we were meeting on camera because that's how we would capture the content. We'd do interview style stuff, but then the process and distribute, like it'd turn into shorts, it would turn into mid-length content. It would get transcribed into articles for Medium.
Yeah.
We'd peel off the audio, put it out on Anchor, like just everything that we could do based on the fit for the client. And that was our first thing. And it ran pretty well for the first 5 years or so. And I called it 80/20 Media because I was fascinated with the 80/20 rule, right? Especially Richard Koch and all of his books on the 80/20 principle. So I learned about Richard Koch first and the Pareto second, to be honest, but the implication that there was always leverage out there fascinated me.
Yeah.
And, fast forward 5 or 6 years, our biggest struggle was how, although we were able to generate the leads through organic content production, they were falling off the flat earth.
Yeah.
They weren't entering a pipeline. And, I can't believe I'm having these conversations today, but even yesterday, I was talking to a guy who's running ads for a client, and it's just kind of frustrated because it's like this guy doesn't want to call the people who filled out the form that said, please call me so I can get an estimate. And, sales is the lifeblood of any business.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So fast forward from there, 7 years ago, we got involved with a tech stack and at the same time started becoming really obsessive about the customer journey. And that's my opinion. Any customer that really doubles down on their customer journey, if you're focused on how you serve and doing your best work, you'll reduce cost of acquisition and you'll increase lifetime value. And that's the fundamental there. We start with that. We build for purpose and we design everything around the customer while streamlining the operations in the business. And automation was our forte, but obviously we're getting a lot more leverage back to that 80-20 rule with AI. And that's where yesterday's conversation finished that, frustrated marketer. It's like, want me to help you out? We have an AI solution that will deploy. It will call every single one of those leads. It will book the on-site estimates. And all that guy has to do now is just show up at the right day at the right time.
What did he say?
He said, that sounds amazing. And, I'll get back to you in a day or two. So he's going to bring that fellow in for a conversation. And we're just going to have that conversation. We're like, hey, that thing that keeps your business above ground that you don't like doing? We're going to use AI to do it for you.
Wow. It's just amazing what AI has allowed those who are willing to investigate it and learn it and then apply it to be able to do that you couldn't do even 6 months ago.
I completely agree. Like I saw a publication from Gartner in October last year that said by the end of 2025, 85% of customer service will be voice AI. And then there's a fellow who stood up on stage at the Web Summit this year in Vancouver, and he said by the end of this year, there will be 8.6 billion agents live. Right? And this is the beginning, and we're at 1 for the population almost.
Wow. So you're combining, I mean, I love the story, and I do want to hear your personal story here in a second, but
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing is you're combining, I'd call it either psychology or neuroscience along with the IT part of this. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, a lot of that has to do with my background because of the accident and all the time I spent learning about rehabilitation. And you can't do that and not learn about the nervous system. And so that's where I got a lot of that information, because buying does have psychology in it, but I think it also very much has neurology in it too. Like there's wiring that goes on underneath the behavior. And really, we can get into that while I was learning rehabilitation first because I wanted to be in better shape than I was told to accept. I started to learn that the mind is the caboose, right? We have the brain and the body and way more neurons than there are in the neocortex. And I got a fantastic visual from it from Ray Kurzweil, actually. I was at an event where he was speaking. And he walked me through the exact same principles, but with a better example than I've been given by anybody else. So now when I'm talking to people about that stuff, I'll pick up a 40-pound kettlebell and be like,
Yeah.
these are the neurons from here down. And then I'll pick up the 25 one and like, these are the neurons from here up. And then the third thing, thanks to Mr. Kurzweil, pull a hanky out of the pocket and crumple it up. And he's like, and that's the neocortex.
I'd say that's a pretty efficient way to deliver that story.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just kind of mind blowing when you really start to think about it because we think about thinking all day long, but it's like, do you really want to trust that thing? Because it can't find your car keys.
Yeah.
Right. And thank goodness it's not responsible for metabolism and
Oh,
heart rate and like all the stuff that keeps us alive.
yeah. So share a little bit about the accident and then your arrival at today?
Okay. Yeah. So I I'm a one percenter, and what that means in the context of clinical rehabilitation, which is a career and a life of mine, is that 1% are a thing called a catastrophic injury. Another 1% are known as some sort of pathological failure, but 98% of pain is actually a compensation pattern, not an injury. And so I'm a one percenter because I was a young driver. I lived in a rural area. And, around 17, I was just driving home after school one day and the truck broke loose on some fresh gravel, slid into the ditch, and I panicked. And you shouldn't try and get out of the ditch at speed.
Yeah.
Front tire came off the rim when it grabbed the soft earth, and then the rim caught the ground and it went end over end 3 times.
Oh,
75 feet of somersaults, and it landed on the roof. And I got my head beat in pretty bad. Both of my arms were broken in several places. And by the time the paramedics had arrived, my veins had collapsed. They had to cut into me to give me an IV. So I was on my way out. And thanks to the people who were the first responders and then the professional first responders and then the airlift to ICU service, I survived. I entered the hospital in a coma and I left there around 3 months later. But as miraculous as the medical system is with their life-saving stuff, especially at that time, their quality of life stuff wasn't there. And so, I got sent home. I got the very true "you're lucky to be alive" speech. I got a pat on the head. And when I asked things like, why doesn't my arm go higher than this? They said, surgery. Like, we did so much surgery on that shoulder. That's why. So that wasn't a good enough answer for me. And I started really pulling at the threads. And it wasn't like the next week or the next year or anything like that. But, as I got into my early 20s, I just started reading and learning as much as I could about health and well-being and started pursuing pathways. And the simple version is I spent the decade of my 20s getting my 10,000 hours. I have paperwork in 9 modalities. One of the biggest benefits of all that training is you have to spend half your time being the subject. And so, I've got a lot of hours of people working on me and professionals and instructors and referrals and all that kind of stuff. And I came out the other end and I opened clinical practice.
wow.
And, I was really fortunate. I had 8 years of apprenticeship in one of the best Pilates studios on the planet, right? Like my Aikido teacher in Japan, he was the last living student of the founder of Aikido. So I got some pretty rich experiences in terms of the lineage and like who I actually got the fortune of studying with. And I studied with 3 of Joseph Pilates' original students. And so I really learned the value of getting to the source of things. And then the understanding how that 98% rule, that's just another version of the 80-20 rule. Right? I was given a formula one day. I think I credit Perry Marshall for this. It's the first time I ever heard it, but 80-20 is the beginning. There's 84-16, right? And there's 92-8. And there's 96-4, and there's 98-2, and there's 99-1. You can increase leverage all the way across it. And the better you get at it, the more leverage you can get. And I know that's true because I'm 6'3". I'm a pretty healthy 200 pounds. And you go to Japan and somebody who's at 5 foot and under 100 pounds would pick me up and chuck me 20 feet across the room. So they have that 99-1 leverage. They've got it figured out and there's nothing I can do about it.
Wow. Now, it, I'm guessing just from our conversations, you apply that same leverage thinking to the business development work you do.
Yeah, I don't know if I can credit any real skill to myself, but in all that clinical rehab training, the whole idea of the problem isn't where the pain is made me really curious. And that's where it shows up in the business development. I'm sure you've got hundreds of hours of stories about stuff in your work where it's like this is the problem, but we had to solve these four or five other things to
Yeah.
get rid of the problem. And so that's when I really started applying a lot of design thinking and that Mobius strip of like come up with it, test it, iterate it, get feedback on it, fix it, and keep repeating it, and just process-based work. And I had enough experiential learning with my own body and then with clients, but then it just showed up as true inside of business and operations.
Wow. That's fascinating. Um, and do you train your team on this?
We do. I mean, we have a principle that we work with about even like how you're onboarded in the processes and how you graduate up the ladder. But there's a line where, I work with them and I'm just kind of remind them you are paid to think, right? This isn't just about doing something, but looking at, is there a better way of doing it? And it's my own little version of the Kaizen principle from Toyota.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Um, so, okay. Wow. I could ask you questions on this track all day long, but let's take a jump. And one of the things we found over the last 30 years is purpose really matters. The purpose that when the founder starts the company, why are we really here? Are we just here because it's a gig economy and I need to pay my bills, or am I here to do something important? Um, so when you think about your business, what's the purpose behind what you do?
Yeah, thank you for that. Our B2B services haven't been around as long as our B2C. And honestly, it's the B2C that got me my experience and my proof of concept and landed me my first real B2B work. And like the CEOs I work with now, I don't give them that title unless they're at seven figures in their business. But the principles remain the same. So when I first set out to solve this B2C problem, and we still have this guarantee in the B2C service, I build businesses for this solopreneur or solo founder, that kind of stuff,
Yep.
where they're going to make multiple six figures in a 20-hour work week, 15 hours for delivery and 5 hours for admin. And the purpose behind that is I think that if you can set that up, you have a hope of achieving it. Like the other 20 hours a week of work, that'll come. You can fill your time with busy work no
Yeah.
matter what. But if you dial in a really clean process and focus on the things that move the needle, then there's a chance you can donate some of that other time. You can work on passion projects and have 20% time, like Google taught us. There's all sorts of different ways that you can do things that are much more functional. And I think if we had a society of a whole bunch of people that were earning double the median income in half of
Yeah.
the work week, they could go out and make a difference. So you talk to most nonprofits and they would rather have people than donations.
Yeah.
And so that was the original purpose. We still have this principle. I will only help you do more of the work you love. Everything else is for automation, delegation, and systems. And we built that and stood it up, and it still stands and works. But now we're doing it in larger organizations, and too many of them have scaled their problems.
Say more about that. I think I love that, but I want to make sure I followed it.
Yeah, I mean, let me give you a little kind of a story, right? Because when we go into B2B, we do a blueprint first. We go in like, let's give you an MRI because every business is leaking revenue in their leads, conversion, sales, onboarding, and fulfillment. And I used to say in those processes, but we've done enough blueprints now to go in and be like, there is no process. Like that's part of the problem why you're leaking revenue. So I was blueprinting a company recently, and the sales lead got headhunted and brought in. He's like, here, you're going to make 20K more a year than that other place on salary, and you're coming in for an equity stake. So he got sold on purpose too. And in the interview, the guy was like, I'm operating at a 4 out of 10, and I'm not happy about it. He's like, where were you at your previous job? He's like, I was a 9 out of 10. I was a superstar. Like nobody wants to feel like that about their work.
But
But we talked about the onboarding, and it basically, since he was replacing a founder-led sales role, the instructions were do what you did at the other place. And that doesn't acknowledge the fact that the customer journeys are completely different.
yeah,
And plus, he was used to having a dashboard and a cockpit and systems in place, and those didn't exist either. And that happens so often. And so I love your question about purpose. I feel like we're still on that thread personally,
oh yeah,
because the biggest bottleneck that we have when we go in and our goal is to move from the blueprint to a proposal to build, and then build in 2 90-day pillars, have first 90 days pay for the entire first year. Because that's year 1 of 3 to 5. We're a growth partner. We want to help you actually scale. But when it's the founder or the people in charge who don't have a vision, then all the other technical solutions for those verticals, it becomes almost an argument.
it does. Absolutely does.
Yeah. And that's the point I made earlier, that I'm sure you could fill like at least the rest of this recording with the amount of times you've experienced that as well.
Easy. You know, and I guess I was slow on the uptake, but it took me 20 years to realize that we use the term alignment, and I think we stole that from robotics or someplace where you get a bunch of robots programmed in a line, and you align them and they hand the part to the next robot and it goes on. But people, alignment's not enough. The people have to be unified to purpose. And
Well said.
if they're not unified to purpose, I mean, we can just, I don't know, I'm sure some of our politics bleed over across the border, but if you go to Washington, everybody's going to say, well, we want lower taxes, we want lower unemployment, and we want, higher wages. But the people, in a sense, you could say that's aligned, but there's no unification whatsoever. They'll kill each other over trying to go to the same place. And,
Right.
When I look at companies, and I'm fascinated by, first, I'm fascinated nobody measures, but when they do measure the amount of revenue per employee and the amount of profit per employee, some companies are tens of millions of dollars of revenue per employee, and others can't get to 100,000.
Right.
And, to me, that's a capacity issue. Somebody figured out how to treat their people well enough that they produce like crazy, and other places they're not producing anything. And
Yeah.
there's got to be more to the story than a live body.
Very well said. Yeah, I love the way you're languaging that, and I completely agree. And this is, not our wheelhouse, right? It's something that I'm super clear about, that we partner really well with organizations or experts or fractionals or that are really people centric, because they like a process is useless without people, right? We'll install systems, we'll create processes with you, but let's get into this part of the conversation early. It's a fantasy that you're going to farm all of it out to AI. And so you need to really deal with the people side of it and make sure that they matter, because the more time I spend inside these businesses, when the people feel that way, all of a sudden the customers feel like they matter. And you can win that game from the inside.
I was at a conference 2 years ago, and this young gentleman was presenting to the whole conference, and he'd worked in he sold tools into automotive repair shops. And, he drove the truck and would sell them their new wrenches and so on and so forth. And he decided he wanted to be in that business. He wanted to own his own repair shop. And he'd spent 10 years selling to them, so he really knew the business. And so he sold his truck and took out his mortgage, and he built this 10 bay auto service operation. And the first year, he only did $1 million in revenue, which just paid the bills and the employees, and basically nothing for himself. And, first year that might be okay, except he realized he was at 90% capacity.
Right.
And so if you do the math, that means the most he's going to do is $1,111,111.11. And that's not enough to pay himself and to grow and maintain changes. And so he went out and hired a coach. And he brought the coach in for himself and his team. And he committed 3% of his gross to developing his team. And year two, and he also closed the business for an hour and a half a week for the coach to come in and work with the team. Well,
Right.
year two ends, he's a little over $2 million, same 10 people, same 10
Yeah.
bays, same building, and he's only at 76% capacity. Now, where did that
Amazing.
capacity come from? It
Yeah.
came from the people. They
Absolutely.
They got innovative, creative, collaborative, whatever language you want to throw at it. They were working as a unit to transfer value to the buyers, and the
Yeah.
buyers responded. And
Yeah.
I just don't get why we don't recognize that the human talent can create capacity that software or robots or other tools can't create, because the innovation.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it gets lost sometimes. There's a lot of sports analogies out there, and you can kind of work towards a performance-based culture. But I do believe quite strongly that if you focus on service, that the performance will come.
Yep, completely, completely concur. Because I've worked with, you know, many years ago during the dot bomb period, we were fortunate. I guess we were fortunate. We had almost unlimited capital to build a new operation. We hired lots of talented people and had all kinds of, Oracle software and, all the right things. And frankly, we did a terrible job. And we had no unified purpose, and most everybody was doing what they believed was important instead of what was good for the customer or what was good for our team. And, I look back on that now and I go, wow, how bad did I screw that part up? But, it happens if you don't have a real purpose to the organization that all the people support. It's hard. That's where friction and chaos come from.
Absolutely brilliant. I wish I'd learned it sooner when I had my clinical rehab practice. But it's a very similar situation. Like the last 3 years that I had my doors open in the physical location, I had a 3-month waiting list. And I got nearly 100% success rate. And the thing that changed it, and again, I don't know why it took me 3 years to figure it out. Most of my clients were seeing other practitioners. So I would get permission and then put them all in an email thread. And then every week, update. And, again, these practitioners were all professionals, like consummate professionals, good at their work. But the way I used to describe it is that there was one Columbus and three boats, right? And they somehow had to all point in the same direction. And, one didn't end up in Antarctica. And that little bit, brought us all aiming towards the same goal, because it did feel sometimes in the nervous systems of the clients like they were being drawn and quartered, because,
Yep.
the different practitioners were doing what they thought was best, but we weren't in communication.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. No, so tell me, if I were your client, what would the experience be that I would go through as one of your clients?
In the B2B space, we want to make sure that we're really clear on the vision. Like there's a client we're in the blueprint process with right now. So he definitely wants to exit, right? That's part of the scenario. The goal is to triple and out. And, in the end, when you go for evaluation, it's the strength of your brand, the size of your list, and the quality of your systems. He's got 2 out of 3.
That creates the multiplier.
He's got the brand and the list, but no systems. So very early on, out here in the resource space, I have a guy who is the exit planner.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought him in first and I said, have a meeting with this guy. We can't go into the blueprint until we know everybody in your team has the same goal. And the goal isn't just to exit, right? But you need that stuff lined up. So, he met with them. He started his process. He's going to be there for the next 3 to 5 years too. Maybe not with the frequency that we are, but those kind of check-ins. Are we still on point? Are we still aiming at the same goal? Are you climbing the right mountain, really? That's a key component. And that's why I said earlier, like the vision of the people in charge are super important, because after the blueprint comes the build. These are the systems you need immediately. Why? Because you're just leaking revenue onto the floor without them.
Yep.
When we deploy those, the thing usually pays for year one in itself, and then we get the trust for the next 90 days. And we built the systems out, and then we're with you for that whole first year. Myself on the operational side, and my business partner on the human to human side, the deployment.
Mm-hmm.
Is your team actually using the tools? Do they know how to pull the lever, push the button, where to find it?
Yep.
All that stuff matters. So that's the foundation in year one. And we want to do that so that into year two, again, we're scaling solutions, not problems.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of small businesses, like between that 2 to 20 million space, especially, their solution for anything, back to that sports analogy, is just push harder, right? Yeah. We're pushing as hard as we can. We'll add 4 more people to push then. To do what? So they can push harder. And that creates a lot of stress, a lot of friction. I think it leaks a lot of revenue through that friction and leaves money on the table.
Absolutely. No question about it. No question about it.
Yeah.
So in the second year, what does the second year look like compared to the first year?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the thing about revenue operations is that the front end is kind of simplistic, meaning if you have figured out a good way to get a good return on your leads, converting those leads and nurturing them through the sales process, then that is kind of static. Okay. You don't want to keep on changing it. You want to just be like, okay, we can put more of this kind of lead in or that kind of lead in, but we know our process to convert them. From the transaction onwards, there's a 30% attrition rate across all industries. So
Customer attrition.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, a bad onboarding experience, and 24 hours after that check is cleared, they're already thinking, I'm not renewing next quarter.
Yeah.
Right? They want to break up with you, but they'll stay with you until the end of dinner.
Yeah. Yep.
And so we're obsessive about those first 90 days. After, we call that onboarding. Onboarding is not 3 emails in week one.
Yeah.
It's 90 days of courtship. And then in the RevOps best practices space, there's the whole idea of go to market. Like, where are you fulfilling? How are you serving? What's the impact you're having in your customers? And the rule of thumb is do one thing really well till you hit 10 million. And then you can consider having a second thing, right? We do roofs. Awesome. Are you at 10 million? Yes. Okay, let's talk about siding, right? But only then and not before then. And it's one of the rules of RevOps. Thou shalt not make the
Yep.
mistake of going broad too soon.
That is critical. We call those offers, and everybody seems to want to have about five of them. And
Yeah.
it just it dilutes everything.
Yeah.
And your employees don't know who you are, your customers don't know who you are, and you're typically not good at any one of the five anymore.
100%. Yeah. And we have our own foot in the door offers. They're part of our service stack. But all those really are things that you can purchase on their own that we already include in our B2B deployment. Right? Some businesses need a leg up. And so it's like, here, this maybe solves that problem. We're not onboarding you as a client yet.
Mm-hmm.
But again, those are just spokes on the wheel for us anyway. Right? And I've actually built a couple bike wheels over the years. It's a tedious process getting the tension of those spokes properly so that the thing is actually straight. Right? I've got a lot of respect for the professionals who do that now that I understand just how much work it is. But that's really what a good automated and operationalized business is. And they all have to be tuned and checked, and then you take it back in for regular maintenance. And that's the rest of that answer, right? For year one, year two, year three, year four, year five, because you're going to have to adjust your systems and processes as you actually grow your team and as technology changes the landscape.
So you really become part of your client's team. And,
Yes,
you know, they now don't have to hire or try to hire to do the things you guys do. You keep that all on target, on path, on time, and give them metrics back and coach or teach when you need to.
yeah. And that means also resourcing, right? Some of the way I think of it is this, especially in that first year and year one and year two, is the structure starts to reveal the human holes, right? You don't know what's going on in the beginning. It's just not working, or you feel like you're working, but not getting anywhere. So as we put structure in, then the human holes start to show up, and then it's time to resource experts in that. I'm not going to train a founder to be a CEO, but I'll operationalize them where they have enough time to go and get that coach that you're talking about and actually start thinking about their business instead of just grinding and having Stockholm syndrome to that 60-hour work week.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are some of the pieces. And that's why we label ourselves as a growth partner, because we want to be there through that process, but we also know our wheelhouse really well and how and when, in our opinion, you should, hire in, hire out, or, consult, really resource experts for periods of time.
I love your model. My question for you now is, we can look at 10 companies between 2 and 10 million that are in the right industries. But aren't there a lot of those 10 companies that either are afraid or they're comfortable where they are and they just don't have the willingness to do the change you're talking about?
I completely agree, and I've got three pieces to that answer. Um, One of them actually is about the nervous system. So I'm really well trained in this clinical rehab stuff. I've got a really good relationship with my nervous system. And so when it comes to level of tolerance, I won't tolerate a certain amount of discomfort or pain. I know something's off immediately, but the brain normalizes incredibly fast. So, for some people, what would be an 8 out of 10 at pain for me is a 2 out of 10 for them because they've been living with it for so long.
Mhm.
And that's part of the human condition. So that's one of the things, right? Is you can get into a business and with the people in charge be like, this must feel terrible. And they're like, no, it's normal.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a component that has to be handled with. And then the other piece is you want to catch them like that when it's still, I'm going to stick with the rehab analogy for a minute, when it's still a muscular pain. Because as a muscular pain, it just means your alignment's out and there's some weight being pushed around here or there. It's not gotten into your biomechanics yet. See, cartilage isn't weight loading tissue, it's articulating tissue. You're not supposed to be so crooked that you're grinding on cartilage. And when you are, and then you continue to exercise and you grind it away, then you're in a bad place, right? Then surgery is the solution. And in business, you don't want to end up in that position where it's that kind of pain, where maybe your only rescue is for somebody to come in, acquire you for pennies on the dollar, and fix the systems that you weren't willing to earlier on.
Boy, is that a true statement. I see that all the time. Um, wow.
And I think we're in a huge transition period, Rick. Like we've got our three kind of avatars and verticals that we're going after to support. But I'm sure you can speak to this. There's part of that boomer transition, and a lot of people who've founded the business and have been there since day one, and they've got kids who don't want to inherit what it is, right? They've got an exit strategy that is still based on hoping that somebody else wants to acquire something that's run on pen and paper, right? And all these scenarios where like that's your life's work and it deserves better than the state that it's in, and you're not going to get what it's worth unless you put these fixes in place.
Yeah, well said. So we could go for another 2 hours, but um, last couple of questions for you.
Mhm.
Given the things you've learned and the things you see and the evolution of business, part of it being transition, the boomers out and Z coming in and AI and all those kinds of things, what advice do you have? First, what's the advice you have for business owners? What should they be thinking about or talking about or doing or um, planning for? And then I'm going to ask you the same question, but for the young person coming in to the opportunity to be in business.
Okay. So for the business owners, I think it's the 20% time. And what I mean by that, there was an article, it was published years ago by the then CEO of LinkedIn. And, I don't remember word for word, but basically it was like my most productive time of the week. And every week for 2 hours, his admin assistant walks into his office, turns off his computer, takes away his phone, turns his chair to face a blank white wall, and leaves him there for 2 hours. I'm trained in more like moving meditation, but like I'll go for a walk. I live around a lot of lakes. I'll go for a paddle, but that's incredibly productive time. And it's been proven with Google and their 20% time, right? Because like Gmail, Google Earth, Google Calendar, like all these things were built as passion projects on the side by these programmers who were given free reign for that time.
Yep.
So as a business owner, I would say figure that out in your life for your time first, and then start to figure out how to put it inside of your organization. And the only way to do that is better operations and better systems, right? It's going to require that those things are up and running for you to give these time gaps. If everybody's just nose to the grindstone all day long, you are missing a lot of opportunities. So that's what I think is kind of the big piece for business owners. And if you start thinking towards that way, and then you have the space to actually think, right? I think it'll look like miracles early on.
Until you realize it was on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, for young people, it's an interesting time. I think we're finally leaving some of that time period with that fascination and that ideology that absolutely everybody should be an entrepreneur. That it's the only true expression of freedom. That's not true. It's damn hard work. And, you know, you have to have that kind of DNA too, where you just refuse to quit and refuse to think about what other people think.
Yeah.
And, you know, those are sold to you as mindset issues, and you're offered courses every single day to overcome them, but that doesn't mean it's in your DNA. If I hadn't had that car accident, I don't know that I'd be in the position that I'm in. Right. And I don't wish an event like that on anyone, to find your entrepreneurial DNA. And so, you know, it's important to find stuff that you love doing and find a place that supports you in doing it, and you being you when you're doing it. I think the culture of the workplace has changed a lot, and a lot of environments have that. But you can find your purpose at work and in employment. It is completely possible, and you don't have to strike out on your own and invent your own thing and start a t-shirt company and whatever to achieve success.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Jacob, this has been really cool. This is certainly one of the most interesting podcasts we've had.
Thank you.
So, is there any last words you'd like to leave with us in general at this point?
Have fun, because it's hard enough anyway, especially in the business and entrepreneurial space. But, you know, the nice thing about work is you can leave it at work and go home. And then that's maybe the other like mandatory minimum 20% time is like do things in life that bring you joy, because life is way too short. And you don't want to be in a position like I was, where you have a crucible moment to figure that out. Like just start behaving like that today.
Great advice. Great advice. Well, I thank you for joining us today. And for those of you in the audience, I hope you had as much fun today as I did. And this one's going to be up for 2 weeks, and then it'll exist out on the web for for a long time. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you so much.